gonna kick this off before you start recording?
I just did start recording.
Okay. So we're actually recording?
We're recording right now.
All right.
You can kick it off this week since I did it last week.
All right. I just want to welcome everybody to part 2 of our 12 Essential Jazz Records vlog. Also want to remind everybody next week we're going to be doing our 12 Essential Prog Records in a 2-part series. So that one's going to get deep. So I guess I'm kicking it off. This is part 2 of our jazz vlog. And last week I kind of leaned into more traditional picks. I'm going to start out with a couple of slightly more traditional picks this week and then kind of veer towards some fusion records that I like. So I'm going to start it off with Booker Little, Out Front. This is actually kind of a rare record. It's on a weird record label that you don't see that often called Candid. And came out in 1961. Features Eric Dolphy, Max Roach, and 2 bass players, Art Davis and Ron Carter. Let me show you this record label because you don't see this very often. Multicolored Candid label. Got a really nice cover too. The cover's really heavy stock. So again, it's one of those sort of hard bop, slightly, veering towards the free jazz world. 61 was pretty early, so it's kind of complex stuff, heavy, but I love Booker Little's trumpet playing. Just amazing stuff. So if you ever see this, grab it.
I haven't heard that one. I'm going to check that out because that's a serious lineup.
Yeah.
They're
anything
all kind
with
of
Eric Dolphy is worth getting. You know?
For sure. Yeah, they're all kind of from different areas of what was going on.
Yeah.
At the time. That's cool.
Well, like I said, it's kind of a rare one. I don't know that I've seen it that often out in the wild, you know. But it's been in my collection for a long time, and it's one of those I just keep going back to.
You're going to let me know if you get that in the shop, right?
Definitely.
Let's see. For my first pick, most of my picks today are they're not really traditional and they're not really fusion necessarily. And this is kind of a good example. This is Shades by Keith Jarrett. This was his American quartet, although they were actually, a lot of them they were a quintet. This was Keith Jarrett, Dewey Redman, Hayden, Paul Motion, and Guillermo Franco, who I think was from Brazil, and he was a percussionist. And this is kind of like when I was talking about the second quintet Miles Davis records last week. Like pretty much any record you can find by this group is going to be interesting. I think this is a really good record to start with, because it's kind of, they have they have a really interesting combination of like free jazz and traditional jazz, but they've also got gospel and a little bit of folk music and country and some kind of rock 60s vibes. So they have all sorts of music kind of mixed up into here. The melodies are really memorable, and the playing is really adventurous. They get themselves into all kinds of trouble. So this is really good. So is like Mysteries, Death in the Flower, basically anything by Keith Jarrett. But
anything by Keith Jarrett. There's lots.
Yeah.
Lots and lots.
Really prolific.
That's actually kind of an unusual pick, for Keith Jarrett.
Right. Well, he's known for like his solo stuff, and he's also got his standards trio.
Yeah, the Cline concert, of course, maybe arguably the greatest solo piano record of all time.
Yeah, yeah.
But speaking about unusual picks, something you probably wouldn't expect from me, but Modern Jazz Quartet Space. Very interesting record. It's right in 1969, right in the heart of the rock era, and just happens to be on Apple Records.
Oh wow.
So actually, jazz financed by the Beatles, if you can believe that. I'm a big modern jazz quartet fan, and generally like almost anything they do, but this one's, got that really sort of deep, haunting flavor to it. Milt Jackson is, I think, at the at his peak on this record, top of his game, as far as chops. But yeah, really, really haunting stuff. They did actually 2 for the Apple label, and they're both really good. So Modern Jazz Quartet Space.
Cool. All right, I'm going to follow that up with basically the same title, but with an S at the end. This is Larry Coryell's Spaces. And this
Great
also
record.
has, yeah, this is a really great record and a really cool lineup. You have Coryell and then John McLaughlin on a lot of tracks. Chick Corea, I think, maybe plays on 1 or 2 on the second side. And then Miroslav Vituis, who I think was the original bass player for Weather Report, and Billy Cobham, who was the original drummer for Mahavishnu Orchestra. And it's not really necessarily a fusion record, I would say. Most of the stuff is pretty straight ahead, but there's just
it's sort of what I would call psychedelic fusion.
Yeah, it's very psychedelic. It's kind of like, well, I'll be talking about ECM in a minute, but it's kind of like ECM with like hair on his chest. It's like really fiery playing, but the harmonies are really spacey and out there, and yeah,
That's
lots
on
of really cool stuff.
That's on Vanguard, right?
Yeah. This is on Vanguard.
Which actually was a folk label, if you can believe that.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Predominantly folk, anyway.
Yeah.
They dabbled with jazz a little bit, but
this was probably a good one to do it with, because this is probably like kind of accessible, I think, for anyone. And they got Scott LaFaro composition "Glorious Step," which is really great, and a tune that he dedicated to Monk, which is called "Wrong Is Right," which I think is a
great tune.
Yeah, but this is really great. I mean, anything by Coryell, but this one especially for me, really fantastic.
Well, as long as we're on the Coryell thing, I got to hit you with my absolute favorite trio fusion record of all time. Larry Coryell, Fairyland. And actually, this was recorded at the Montreux Jazz Festival in 1971. The record didn't come out till 1976. This is actually the first cover of the record, and then it was reissued later on in an even more bizarre cover.
That's the one I have.
Yeah. So this features Bernard Purdy on drums. It's just totally funky. It's I guess the best way to describe this would be psychedelic jazz fusion with funk overtones. And Coryell actually sings on a track too, which I really enjoy his vocals. He's not a typical vocalist. He sort of sings like a jazz guitarist plays, like his phrasing's almost exactly what you would expect if he was doing, single note lines.
Yeah.
But it's got just this incredible psychedelic thing going on. It's almost like Jimi Hendrix, playing jazz with like faster, jazz chops or something.
For sure.
But really cutting edge, really in your face,
Yeah.
So again, Larry Coryell, Fairyland.
And who's on bass on there?
Chuck Rainey. Yeah.
That's the Steely Dan rhythm section. Or
yeah.
One of them.
Well, later it was, I believe, right?
Maybe
71.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Maybe they hadn't even been playing on those records yet.
Yeah, I think that came a couple of years later.
Yeah.
I'm not totally sure, but I think a couple of years later, because most of the Steely Dan stuff they were on was like mid 70s, right?
Yeah. Right. The later funky stuff. Yeah.
So this is, the actual concert was, live at Montreux 1971, pretty early, like maybe one of the most cutting edge fusion records, to that point,
Mm-hmm.
like
Yeah.
way more in your face than Mahavishnu even,
Yeah.
and raw, really raw.
Yeah.
So this is like, this is like one of my go-to fusion records. I just love it. I play it over and over. I probably heard it hundreds of times, and I just love it. So
Yeah. Let's see, what's next? This is kind of a, maybe some people will have qualms with me for pulling this out, but I think this is I think especially if you're just starting to get into jazz, and maybe you're not into the whole instrumental thing or the people playing really fast thing, which I know some people have a problem with, this would be a good record to start with. This is Mingus by Joni Mitchell. So maybe, I don't know if the labels technically put it as a jazz record, but it's basically, it's a record that Joni Mitchell did with Mingus as he was about to pass away. She was writing lyrics for his tunes, and I don't remember what the original plan was, but I know that it was what they ended up making was slightly different than what they originally set out to do. But they got a lot of his really, his famous compositions on here, or at least, well, I mean, they have Goodbye Pork Pie Hat. That's like his famous one. But God Must Be a Boogeyman is also great. Chair in the Sky. Dry Cleaner from the Des Moines. If you're a jazz vocalist, you got to learn that one. It's really great. But the lineup on here is ridiculous. They got, also, this is really worth having on vinyl because you have all these beautiful paintings. Check that out.
Joni Mitchell paintings.
Yeah, right. Hold on, how does this open up? Here's another one. But you got Joni Mitchell and Jaco. This is kind of like right in the, I think in the, this might have been the first record she did with Jaco. And Wayne Shorter, anything with him is going to be good. Herbie Hancock, Peter Erskine from Weather Report, Don Elias. I don't remember who he played with. He might have been, I'll get back to you on that. Emil Richards on percussion. It's kind of a fusion record, but then she's like singing over the top. Her phrasing is like unbelievable. It's like the only, and I kind of sometimes don't really like jazz vocalists that much just because the lyrics are often just very contrived, but she writes such great lyrics, and she sings over the changes really well.
She really took the whole jazz vocal thing into a completely new direction.
Yeah.
And obviously her bands were some of the best, some of the most monumental fusion bands in history.
Yeah.
Speaking of her bands, my next pick, Pat Metheny, Bright Size Live, and Metheny and the bass player, Jaco Pastorius, on this record, both played with Joni Mitchell. I believe that's how they met, right? Was playing in her band.
I think this record was before they were in her
before
band.
that.
Yeah.
This is another just monumental trio record. Just really raw, really spacious, stripped down. But of course, anything with Jaco Pastorius and Pat Metheny, just amazing chops. Bob Moses is on drums on this, who actually played with Larry Coryell and the Free Spirits, another psychedelic fusion project that goes back to the late 60s. So this is also an early ECM record. And ECM stuff is always great.
Yeah.
I pick up just about anything I can find. But yeah, if you're into that sort of spacious trio thing, you got to have this.
Yeah. We keep finding a lot of connections because I have an ECM record to talk about. Like you said, anything by ECM pretty much is gonna be good and interesting. This I think is, along with Bright Side's Life, I think a really good introduction to just that kind of sound and musical approach. This is Solstice by Ralph Towner, and it's got a really great band. It's got Jan Garbrick, Eberhard Weber, and Jan Christensen, who are like really, they're kind of like ECM staple musicians. They played in all sorts of different groups, and yeah, it's just a really cool record. There's some really like great compositions and some really great free playing and like soundscapes and stuff like that. And yeah, Ralph's playing is just very. He started off initially as a jazz pianist, and he was also, I think, at school studying classical guitar.
Classical, yeah.
Yeah, so his guitar playing is like, here's a picture on the back. His guitar playing, he doesn't play like really any other jazz guitar players, and there aren't really many who, even afterwards, have sound that much like him. I've heard a couple people that kind of sound like they're picking up some of his things, but he's really fantastic. He plays 12-string. They get all sorts of cool sounds. Jan Christensen, he's just a fantastic drummer. He just passed away this year, but he's can be funky, but really, really detailed and intricate, and he makes really great music. So this is a good introduction to the ECM sound, but anything you can find by them is going to be pretty good.
Yeah, pretty much anything Ralph Towner put out is excellent.
Yeah,
Always been one of my favorites. Probably a big influence on my playing, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna stick with the same vibe here. You got to show this one. Jaco Pastorius, Word of Mouth, one of the most stellar records of the early 80s, incredible lineup of musicians. Just to give you an idea, Jack DeJohnette, I'm going to skim over some of the guys that are lesser known, but Toots Thielman, John Clark, David Duke, Chuck Findlay, Tommy Johnson. I mean, look at the list. These are all people who played on this record. I mean, it goes on and on and on. Hubert Laws, Wayne Shorter, James Walker. I mean, I could sit here all day reading these. Like, pretty much anybody who's anybody is on this record. And it was kind of the first thing that Jaco Pastorius had total control over. And he played not just bass, but he played drums, played piano on this. He wrote the pieces. I mean, it is literally a masterpiece. And sound quality wise, I think it's one of the best sounding records of, the 80s. This came out, I believe, in 81. So, kind of in that same period where Pat Metheny and all those guys and ECM was really, at their peak. And this actually was on Warner Brothers too, which was very unusual for a jazz cat like that to jump into a major label deal.
Yeah.
So, but
He's a superstar.
at that point, he was the best bass player in the world.
Yeah.
So as anybody who knows the story after this, he did a few other decent things, but his personal front went into a serious decline, and it was one of those sad stories, but definitely one of the great geniuses of jazz.
Yeah. There's a really great documentary. I don't know if it's still on Netflix, but I know that it was on Netflix. But for everyone else,
yeah, that's good.
Looking for something to do while they're at home, it's got everybody on it. It's got Joni,
yep.
all the musicians he played with talking about him. Really great documentary.
Yeah, I mean, he's kind of known for Weather Report, but he played with Joni Mitchell. He played with Pat Metheny on Bright Side's Life. I mean, he made a serious impact in a very short period of time.
Yeah. This is a record that's I think maybe came out like a year ago or 2 years ago. And this is probably the most modern record that we have on the list. And I thought I'd just throw it in case you're trying to have something as a jumping off point for what's going on right now. This is the Nels Cline 4. Nels Cline is one of the guitar players, I guess the lead guitar player in the band Wilco, who's really great. And he's also got Julian Lage, who's played with everybody. He was playing with Gary Burton when he was like 16. He's really fantastic. And then you have Tom Rainey on drums. I'm not sure as much of what he's done, but Scott Colley, who's played with pretty much everybody. He's a really fantastic bass player. And this album's just got a lot of really, first of all, look at this cover. Great cover. But it's got a lot of cool things, some really aggressive, like angsty sort of stuff, and then some like really gorgeous, lush, beautiful pieces on it. And the playing is really adventurous. They cover all the different grounds of where jazz can go pretty much. So I highly recommend this. This is called Currents and Constellations.
Yeah, it's sitting in my stack down here. Yeah, great record. So I'm going to show something kind of modern too, and this is something that you don't see real often, but Oliver Lake Impala. And what this is, it's kind of a free bop thing from the 80s. Came out in 87. It's on a weird label called Gramavision, which I think a lot of their stuff was sort of lighter jazz, but this one is heavy bop, you know. Everybody I played this for has just been blown away. So if this guy's a great saxophonist. I believe he was in the World Saxophone Quartet for a while. But you know, he's got a lot of stuff out. The other stuff is good, but it's not great. This one is phenomenal. So if you ever see this, excellent album. And I know I played this for you when you were over. You don't remember, but I mean, you were blown away by this. This is a great record. So a little bit unusual.
Sweet. All right, I got one more pick. This is one of my all-time favorite records. I listen to this all the time. This is Native Dancer by Wayne Shorter. And I think this was right. I think he was probably playing with Weather Report. This is 75. So they definitely started Weather Report by this time. But it's kind of a fusion record in a sense, but it doesn't have like the balls to the wall, like shreddy kind of sound that a lot of stuff was doing. It's very much inspired by Brazilian music and the MPB stuff that was going on, which is why it features Milton Nascimento, who's just a fantastic vocalist, and also I don't have any of his records on vinyl, but it would almost be worth just doing like a week on him, but I don't have any of his records. But he's really great. And you got Herbie, of course, Erta Moreira, who we talked about last week on Return to Forever, Dave McDaniel, who I don't know, Roberto Silva, Wagner Tiso, who I think was a Brazilian pianist, and Jay Graydon, David Amaro. And there's some really great tunes on here. Ponta de Areia, I think, was one of Milton's tunes. It's pretty famous. Let's continue this talking about records.
You're being summoned.
Miracle of
It was
the
your
Fishes.
pronunciation on the last one that set that off.
Yeah, it must have been. My Brazilian is bad. But Miracle of the Fishes, really cool tune. What else? Anna Maria is one of Wayne's more famous tunes. This whole record is great. Get this record. I don't see it all that often, so if you see it,
I don't even know that one.
You don't know this one?
No.
Ooh, this is a fantastic record. And Wayne's playing is like, this is, some people I think got I don't know, they weren't digging the way he was playing with Weather Report, because he'd play like 2 notes on an entire song. They'd be like, what the heck, man? And this is a good balance where he's spacious, but then there's a couple of moments where he's just like really shredding. Everything is super musical. All the percussion and this is great to listen to with good speakers or headphones because the percussion is all over the place and creates all sorts of great textures. This is a really fantastic record.
Cool.
Yeah.
So you had an extra record last time.
Yeah.
So I got an extra record this time.
That's fair.
Honorable mention. Hugh Masekela. Home is where the music is.
I don't even know that one.
Really? I
No.
love Hugh Masekela. For anybody who's not familiar, he's a South African trumpet player.
Oh, okay. I know who he is. Yeah.
Yeah, he's done a lot of stuff that sort of fuses Afro beat, rhythms and stuff with jazz. This is just a phenomenal record. I mean, I like all his stuff, but yeah, great stuff. He's got a really haunting tone, plays flugelhorn a lot. This has got a pretty interesting cover. Check out the art.
Wow. Yeah, he was like a big deal in the anti-apartheid movement.
Yeah.
I think, right? He passed away maybe like
Yeah, there's a really good box set of his stuff out too that came out a couple of years ago. Really good.
Yeah.
This is on Blue Thumb Records, which is kind of weird because that's known as being a blues label. And I don't know that they did a lot of jazz stuff, but yeah, check out the back.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
I'm gonna keep an eye out for that one. Wow.
Yeah. Well, anything by him is worth picking up for sure. I mean, great stuff. Very, very unusual, kind of, jazz with world beat overtones.
Yeah.
So I just want to tell everybody that we're going to be back next week with our prog picks. That's going to get crazy. I've been digging, Also want to tell everybody that I own Paramount Record Shop in Watertown, Wisconsin. We're open to the public on Fridays and Saturdays and by appointment during the week. So give us a holler if you're looking for stuff. We get in collections pretty often and we're always looking to buy stuff. So.
Yeah. All right. Thanks everyone for joining and we'll see you next week.
All right. See ya.